In this video, I'm going to walk through the cross-modulation filter module, and we will use this module when we program the high roller bass patch. So what I'm going to do is bring in the XMF1 and just point out a couple things here before we get started. One is I have the initialized patch loaded, so if I disable XMF1 and just hold down the key, I'm going to play an A note. Okay, familiar sound. Now, if I enable this, I want to point out a couple of things. There are two inputs here. There's a side chain, and I will explain what that is later in the video when I talk about some of the parameters. But that is why there are two lines here. There's one line going into the main input, and then another line going into the side chain. Now, what the cross-modulation filter does is it actually contains two filters, and the filter types are low pass, band pass, and there's a number next to it, and that number indicates the number of poles. So if you recall from the video on filters and filter envelopes that I did before the course started, the number of poles indicates the filter slope. So if it's a one-pole filter like this one, LP1, then that would be a 6 dB per octave slope. A two-pole would be a 12 dB per octave slope, and a 3-pole would be an 18 dB per octave slope, and a 4-pole would be a 24 dB per octave slope. Now, the various filter types that the cross-modulation filter module supports are low pass, band pass, high pass, band reject, and the all pass. And these filters work the same way that I explained earlier in one of the other videos when I talked about the VCF module and the various filter types. It's just the cross-modulation filter is more powerful, and because it allows you to have basically two different filter types in one module, and it supports a number of different what they call characters, what this switch down here is for. There's an XMF character, analog, biased, economy, and folded, and I'll be demonstrating the sound of each one of these in a minute. But I wanted to talk about the routing internally, and probably before I do that, let me just do a quick demo of the current default mode. So I'll hold down the key here. And it is capable of self-oscillation, so if I bring up the resonance all the way, so the filter is oscillating at the cutoff frequency. Okay, so cutoff, I've already explained that in previous videos. Resonance, the same thing. Key follow, you already know about that. And then overload, that actually drives the filter harder and in effect adds more saturation or distortion. So let's listen to that real quick. Okay, now let me talk about what's going on with these two filters. Right now, filter 1 is set to LP4 and filter 2 is set to same, and that means that it's the same as filter 1. Okay, if we wanted to have different ones, we could. If I wanted to, I could have two LP4s. All right, but now we have to understand, well, how the routing works, and that's controlled by this middle one. So in single mode, it's actually the standard mode, and the way that works, it's probably easiest if I reproduce that type of mode with the regular VCF filters. So let me use lanes 3 and 4 to demonstrate what this routing is, and I'm going to mute lane 1 for a moment while I do this. So on lane 3, I'm going to create or add a VCF1. And on lane 4, I'm going to add VCF2. Okay, and I'm just going to leave those as LP excite. Okay, those are each 24 dB filters, and in effect a 4-pole filter. Now, what I want to do is pan VCF1 to the left, or lane 3, pan that to the left, and then pan lane 4 to the right. Okay, and what I want to do now is have each of these take an input from oscillator 1. So what I'm going to do is right-click on VCF1 and set its input to input 1. In fact, because of the way Zebra interface works, the positioning here, by default it takes, if there's a component directly to its left, it will take that. Or if there's a component on the same row, it will take that. But what I'm going to do is move it up. So now it takes oscillator 1, and I'll move this one up too. And I want to set input 1 to VCF2 as well. So now both of these filters take their input from oscillator 1. And then here we've muted lane 1's output when it gets to this point, so we won't hear that. But we'll still have oscillator 1 routed over to VCF1 and VCF2, and we will hear lane 3 and lane 4 output. So let me demonstrate that. Okay, so we hear the output of VCF1 and VCF2. So now let me bring the cutoffs down. Okay, and you notice that they kind of separated on the left and right. And let me move this over so that we can see the entire display here, both in the spectrum analyzer and the oscilloscope. So remember the blue line, in fact, let me do that again. The blue represents the left channel and the green represents the right channel. And you can see that the green graph here rolls off faster than the blue. So the right channel, which in this case is lane 4, which is connected or has VCF2 on it, its cutoff is lower than the left channel, which is lane 1. Its cutoff is higher. So this is an example of what the single routing is for the cross modulation filter. It takes filter 1 and puts it on the left channel, and filter 2 and puts it on the right channel. Okay? And the difference between the two cutoff frequencies are based on this offset parameter here. Okay? So this is an offset from the main cutoff here, which is for filter 1. So now I can demonstrate how these are the same by muting lane 3 and lane 4 and unmuting lane 1, and I'll set the offset to 0 so that they both track at the same initially. And then as I play it, I will increase the offset here, and you'll see a similar effect displayed that we just went through with the voltage control filters. Okay, so now we see that the left cutoff frequency is higher than the right because the right has a much faster roll-off. And remember, in the signal analyzer, the blue represents the left channel. So in effect, that's filter 1 here. And the offset was being applied to filter 2, which is on the right. In fact, though, what I want to do is check that because I'm thinking the positive offset would have resulted in the left channel. Let me test something real quick. Okay, I see what's happening. You'll notice that as I bring the offset up, it's actually moving both. So what it's doing is it's taking the cutoff frequency, and that's in effect going to be the center, and then it's taking the offset and it's adjusting each of the filter's cutoffs plus or minus based on that offset value. So just keep that in mind, that this cutoff does not represent the cutoff of, well, it does not necessarily represent the cutoff of filter 1, because you'll see both of these move when I adjust offset. So let me do that again. Okay, so they both move in tandem there when I move the cutoff, but they maintain the same offset value as I move the cutoff. All right, so let's look at the other filter routing modes here in the cross-modulation filter. Serial would be as if we have one filter after the other. So if I dragged VCF2, said same, then this would be an example of serial routing. We'd have one filter followed by another. Parallel would be basically like this, but not necessarily panned like I had before. So let's check that. See, even with the offset, we don't see that separation between the left and the right stereo channels. There's no blue and green. They're both one on top of the other. Okay, so they're both getting the same signal. So then finally, the diff represents the difference between these two filters. So let's see what that looks like. So when offset is 0 and we have diffed routing, both signals are one subtracted from the other and in effect canceling it out. But as soon as I apply an offset, there is some difference. Now it might be interesting to try a different filter type here, like a band pass, let's say. Okay, so you get the idea. So that's the routing between these for the cross-modulation filter. So I'm going to go back to single and just go through and set this to same. And I'm just going to go through and demonstrate a couple of these. And let's look at the all pass. And I'm going to go ahead and go to 11 here and detune. Alright, so you can go through and experiment with these different filter types. I'm going to go back to LP4 and I want to demonstrate the 4 character modes that it has, or characters, for resonance and overload. And so let me go ahead and demonstrate the resonance with XMF. Okay, now let's look at overload. So you can get some really cool distortion effects using this module. Now let's look at the analog mode. Has a different overall quality to it based on the overload and resonance. Okay, next let's look at biased. And eco. Now let's look at folded. Okay, so that takes care of the different characters, and I'm going to set it back to XMF. The other thing we can look at is this filter FM. This is basically frequency modulating the filter, and so let me demonstrate that. Might be interesting for some special effects type sounds. Now, the other thing that we can do with this filter FM is we can have another oscillator on a different lane here, and let me mute that lane, and then set the input, that sidechain input, set it to 2. So now it's grabbing the input from the lane 2, okay, output of lane 2. And now what's going to happen is oscillator 2 will be frequency modulating this filter cutoff frequency. So now it sounds like this. And if I bring the volume level up on oscillator 2 and then bring the tune down, Some pretty crazy stuff there. And lastly, this click parameter here should be adding a little bit more attack. It's kind of hard to hear though. Let me bring this back to sidechain 1 and set the waves voice on oscillator 1 to single. Yeah, you can hear there's a little extra click in there at the beginning. And that's really it for the cross modulation filter. So go explore that and see what kind of sounds you can make with that. It's pretty wild. I'll see you in the next video.